Hey everybody, welcome back to some more Showdown in the Badlands card reveals. This time, Shaman was up to the plate, and boy did they deliver some Shaman cards. Holy moly, this might be the strongest class revealed so far. Now, if you remember way back to the first episode of this, where I went through some of the neutrals, I did show off these elemental packages. So stuff like the Azurite Giant. I also mentioned the Living Prairie was going to be added to the game. So this is one of the Shaman cards we've already seen. And Eroded Sediment. And I mentioned that these cards are good enough for an elemental package. It's probably going to be good enough for Mage. Obviously, Living Prairie wouldn't go into Mage, but like Azurite Giant and the Eroded Sediment would go into a elemental Mage deck, and I could see the support there for that. But Shaman needed a little bit of extra tools, and we'd have to wait and see. And boy, did they get some tools to play Elementals. I think Elemental Shaman is going to be probably one of the most played decks on the first day, at least from what we've seen so far. There's many more classes to come, so, you know. But boy, am I excited. So, what is the big payoff for running these actually really good Elementals? Scar the Catastrophe, the legendary for Shaman. 7 mana 7/7 Elemental. Battlecry. Deal 1 damage to all enemies. Improve for each turn in a row you've played an Elemental. This is actually an insane card. I think this will be... I think this is already on its own good enough to make you try to run Elemental Shaman decks. The closest cards I can think to this in the past, we had Firemancer Flurgle in like Murloc Shaman's deck, and this guy, he made a mess of Wild, right? He could pump out so much damage, you know. He could be used as a control, just finishing off opponents. Also remember, Mordresh the Fire Eye that saw play in many a Mage deck just to finish people off with the requirement of doing 10 damage with your hero power, which had some support, and did 10 to all enemies. That card saw a lot of plays. I think it's well within reason for Scar, with some of the Elementals we've seen and what are in the pool right now, that you could play an Elemental for 10, 15 turns in a row, drop Scar on the board and just finish off your opponent. Bearing in mind that this is probably going to be a tempo deck, right? You're going to just be playing Elemental turn after turn after turn. Your opponent has to respond to it each time. Some of the Elementals also push out some damage. You can throw in some nature spells as well to chip people down. It could truly be a destructive deck. Even a catastrophic deck. What an incredible payout. And it comes out 1 turn earlier than Mordresh. Insane. Insane. But that's not all they got, by the way. The Walking Mountain, a 9 mana 4/16. Rush, Lifesteal, Mega Wind Fury, Overload 2. Do you remember the Walking Fountain? Well, this is him now. Did he feel old? In the past, we had this Walking Fountain, which is clearly what this is a play on. That was an 8 mana 4/8 with Lifesteal Rush and just Wind Fury, you know, good old-fashioned basic Wind Fury. And Walking Fountain saw a lot of play in slower, controlier Shaman decks or value decks. You can push out 8 fast damage. The stats are in a really nice orientation for you to hit 2 minions. You're probably going to get 8 health off it. You know, 8 mana for something that does 8 damage, 8 health. That's pretty good. Walking Mountain, 4/16 Mega Wind Fury. Just in case you're not aware of what Mega Wind Fury is, because it's never been printed on a base card like this before. It attacks 4 times per turn. 4. So you could do 16 damage split up into blocks of 4, heal for 16, and the minion might live. And if that thing starts rushing you in the face, well, it's going to start hitting you in the face if you don't deal with it. You're in trouble. And effectively, you know, this has been packaged as 11 mana because it has Overload 2 on it, which for some decks is fine. If you want to try and run it into an Overload deck, you might want to Overload. Now, in the past, we've had 2 cards with Mega Wind Fury on it before, but you had to jump through hoops to get there. We had Murmuron's Head that gave you Voltron. You had to have 3 mechs on your board at the start of your turn with the Murmuron's Head. It would destroy all those mechs and you would get Voltron with Charged Mega Wind Fury. The other one was Whirlwind Tempest, which gave your Wind Fury minions Mega Wind Fury instead. Walking Mountain just gets that just immediately. You just throw it on the board, you Mega Wind Fury away. What an insane card. And again, if you're trying to play these elementals turn after turn after turn, you might play some turns which aren't as efficient as you'd like, but you want to get the big catastrophe payoff at the end. This Walking Mountain allows you to get catch-up. 16 health! At least potentially 16 health. Obviously, you might just clear the board before then. And your opponent has to deal with this because it's going to push 16 damage otherwise. Incredible card. This will definitely see play in the Elemental Shaman deck, and I think there's going to be an Elemental Shaman deck. And there's more! It's not just these two. Minecart Cruiser, 3-mana 4/5 Elemental. Rush, Overload 2. Battlecry, if you played an Elemental last turn, don't Overload. It's a 3-mana 4/5 Rush! What? That's crazy! It's crazy! Within reason, like, there's so many elementals out there, just a smattering of them for you. You have Menacing Nimbus at 2, Flame Revenant, which I think will go into this deck at 2, Rolling Stone might not quite see play this, but again, it's an option if you want it, and Shock Copper might go in there if you want a turn 1 elemental as well. Plus, it gives you Overload cards, which might give you a Walking Mountain now. That seems fun, right? Or it could give you a Minecart Cruiser. So there's a lot of ways to play an elemental before turn 3. And you're going to definitely mulligan to keep Minecart Cruiser plus a 1 or a 2 cost elemental, because this is such insane tempo. It's a 3-mana 4/5 with Rush, not just a 3/4/5, bare stats that I think a 3-mana 4/5 just neutral card might get into some decks. You might sneak it in there. This has Rush. It's so good. I mean, if you valued this at 4 mana, you'd be like, okay, this is a pretty basic card. At 3 mana, it's disgusting. These will all go into the Elemental Shaman deck. But wait, there's more! 2 mana Trusty Companion. Give a minion +2/+3. If it has a minion type, draw one of that type. So, you might get unlucky with your draw and draw a few spells. No, Trusty Companion, you put it on an elemental, you guarantee drawing an elemental to play on your next turn. Just as a comparison, by the way, Mark of Yasiraj, which saw playing Druid, gave a minion +2/+2, and if it was a beast, you would draw a card. Trusty Companion, as long as it has some sort of tribe, will draw you a card, so it has less of a restriction on it and gives you 1 more health. Hand of Adal, which sees play in Paladin, not all the time, but has at least some people consider it, +2/+1, draw a card, with no conditions on it. This is +2/+3, draw a card of that type, which benefits elementals. Now, also bear in mind, and I've put this here for like a segue, you could try and run a Murloc Shaman and put this in your Murloc Shaman. You could run Totem Shaman and put it in your Totem Shaman. This will be, honestly, going forward for this set, I can see this being a cornerstone of Shaman. Shaman historically has trouble with drawing cards. They needed a card drawer, and Trusty Companion is such good value for the cost. I think it's going to slot into so many Shaman decks. I'm calling it now, this will be a 5-star card. This will be like low-key one of the insane cards of the set. But it's just going to go like under the radar. It'll just go into every Shaman deck. Now we go into the other side of the Shaman. So, Elementals, we're done with you for now. You're insane. We will definitely be seeing you on release. We did show off this card as well, Dehydrate, which was a 3-mana lifesteal, deal 4 damage to a minion, quick draw, cost 1. This becomes more like a controlled-based Shaman deck. There's been some reveals towards that ilk. This Dehydrate, I compared it to Penance from Priest, which was 1 mana. For 1 mana less, you got lifesteal, but for 1 less. So obviously the high roll of Dehydrate is higher, but it's kind of comparable, a 3-mana deal 4 lifesteal to a 2-mana 3 lifesteal. Penance didn't really see much play. I don't think Dehydrate will see much play. Tidal Surge was 3-mana 5 lifesteals to a minion. I think that did see a decent amount of play. It was around Ungoro, so it's going to come out in Twist again. So I'm pretty certain that Dehydrate will not cut the mustard. If you can guarantee the quick draw, then great, but I'm still not convinced I've seen enough in quick draw yet for it to work as a mechanic. I think there has to be a card in your class that lets you cycle your hand easily. I know they release a neutral like that, but I don't think you'd put the neutral in just for this quick draw effect. It's just not worth it. I put conductivity on the side because, like, I guess the highest of high roll plays is if you can conductivity on a... Sorry, if you play conductivity and you dehydrate with the quick draw and your opponent has 3 minions, you might be able to do 1 mana heal 12. Great. It's a high roll, it requires your opponent to have minions, requires you to draw this card, requires you to have conductivity. I just don't think it's going to come to fruition. I don't think this card will see play. A card I do think we'll see play in Control Shaman, Giant Tumbleweed! Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. 7 mana nature spell. Deal 6 damage to all minions. Summon a 6/6 Tumbleweed. The Tumbleweed has no tribe, it's just a 6 mana 6/6. This card for Control Shaman is insane. Shaman didn't really have access to a big chunky board clear spell anymore. A bit like, I should have put this on my thing, Earthquake or something of that ilk. Now they do. It's Giant Tumbleweed. You can almost see it like a buffed up version of Flame Strike or something similar to Soul Stealer even. Flame Strike doesn't really see much play anymore, but it has seen play in the past for control mages. Giant Tumbleweed does 1 more damage. Admittedly, it's to all minions, not just the enemy minions, so it has that downside. But the upside is you get a 6/6 body on top of all of that, so I think this is a better variant of Flame Strike. Soul Stealer as well could be comparable to it. Dealing 6 to all minions is probably going to be a board clear for a lot of decks. Maybe not Warlock. And Soul Stealer would give you a 5/5 at the end of it. This is 1 mana cheaper, gives you a 6/6, but probably won't clear certain classes of boards, i.e. Warlock. The other benefit of this, if you remember back a expansion or two, there was a lot of Control Shaman going around with Evolve packages. So you could quite easily see you having Muck Pool in the field or something. You play your 7 mana board clear, you get the Tumbleweed, and you evolve it, because like 6 mana 6/6, it's not great stats for the cost, but a 7 mana, you could roll into some decent stuff there. So I wouldn't be surprised if people try this Control Shaman package with an Evolve layer on top of it. And spoilers for the future, it's probably going to be a Highlander deck if they're going to try and do that. Just before we get around to the Highlander side of things, I spoiled a bit of the card here. My animation was awful. Amphibious Elixir is another card that would go in towards this control-orientated deck. 2 mana, nature spell, restore 5 health, discover a spell. It's a package of Flash Heal from Priest and the Raven Idol from Druid. Except you're discovering the spell, right? It's pretty basic. Typically, if you combine a package together, it's better than the 2 original cards. Flash Heal very occasionally saw play in Priest when they didn't have better heal options. Raven Idol didn't see that much play. I don't think Amphibious Elixir will see play either. I don't think it would get into this Evolve package. I think you're more likely to try and freeze your opponent instead and taunt up a little bit. But if in the future, if there's a healing Shaman package, Amphibious Elixir is pretty efficient. Now, we get to the other legendary and why we would want to run Highlander. 5 mana, 4/5, Dr. Holiday. Battlecry, if your deck has no duplicates, equip the Staff of the 9 Frogs. And the Staff of the 9 Frogs is a 5 mana 2/9 weapon. After your hero attacks, summon a 1/1 frog with Taunt, and then each frog is bigger than the last. That is pretty insane, honestly. So this thing is going to hit you eventually for 18 damage. If, the game lasts long enough. And your last frog is going to be... just a quick maths. It's going to be like a 9/9, right? A 9/9 taunt after attacking. That is pretty good value. However, I don't think... I think this is a good card, don't get me wrong. The problem with this card is that Ignis exists, and by virtue of Ignis existing, a lot of people are running Rustrot Viper to do weapon destruction. They will throw the Rustrot Viper into the Staff of the 9 Frogs, in which case Dr. Holiday is a 5 mana 4/5. That will probably have given you a 1/1. And it will have made you restrict your deck requirement to have no duplicates, which is very big for Shaman. especially a more control shaman orientated deck, which I think is what you would be going for with Dr. Holiday. And unlike Priest, which we talked about in the past, I don't think Shaman has the tools to go into a Highlander control deck and still be good, and still work if Dr. Holiday gets ruined. So I think, sadly, that it's just not going to work. But if we get into a world where people don't run Rostrot Viper that much, Staff of the Nine Frogs, it gives you like almost an inevitability, like a bit like a Mograine, that this threat is just going to pile up and pile up and pile up, and it's going to get harder and harder for your opponent to deal with, and eventually you're just going to overwhelm them. Also, just to point out again, if you're going to run some Evolve package, which I think you would do in this Highlander deck, Muckpool's evolving one of these frogs is also pretty good value for you. You could imagine like your 7/7 frog or something taking a hit for you, protecting your face, protecting your health pool, and then you can just evolve it, which is almost like a pseudo heal, right? Why heal when you can evolve? And then the final card, which kind of goes into its own little world, is the Cactus Cutter. A 2-mana 2/2 Murloc with Battlecry. Draw a spell. If you cast it this turn, gain +1/+2 and Taunt. Now, not many people are playing Murloc Shaman right now, and I'm not going to go through the whole, Murloc Shaman package. Howdyfin was added, which again is another Murloc, and we have stuff like Clownfish, you could really vomit Murlocs out onto the board. Is this going to be good enough to elevate Murloc Shaman above what I think its biggest competitor really is Totem Shaman, which does the similar thing but just better? I'm not convinced by it. However, there are some really good cheap spells you could put in the deck, so you could almost guarantee that you're going to get the +1/+2 Taunt effect. So it's almost like a 2-mana 3/4 Taunt guaranteed. You could throw Melamania into the deck, where you get rewarded for throwing all your Murlocs onto the board, right? And you're getting spells whilst you're doing it. You're guaranteed to cast the spell at 0 mana. Perfect. You can put Schooling in there. It's 1 mana, very cheap. So you could be looking at playing Cactus Cutter on 3. You could put Lightning Bolt in to chip your opponent's face down. But I think all in all, it's going to prove to be too slow. I think you can also try stuff like Zap at 0 mana, but I think what is most likely happening is you're going to play Cactus Cutter on 3. You'll get a 1-cost spell. It'll become a 3-mana 3/4 with Taunt, basically, plus drawing you a card. Is that good enough? It's pretty good, but I don't think it's as good as what Totem Shaman could do now. But I'm sure some people will try this, and definitely if you're a big fan of Murloc Shaman, this Cactus Cutter will go into your deck, and maybe you can do some ridiculous plays where you get big value from Melamania. You go hyper-aggressive, your opponent burns all their spells dealing with your boards and waves and Murlocs, and just your random Shaman spells at the end just give you that extra little bit of value that Totem Shaman just doesn't have. They eventually run out of stuff after like 3 board clears. Maybe the Murlocs can go a little bit longer than that, so they may find their own little niche. Anyway, the Shaman card set, really insane. I think a lot of interesting archetypes are being pushed in this. I think there's going to be, certainly the Elemental Shaman will see some play. I think Totem Shaman got a nice tool with the spell that draws you another totem. I think Murloc Shaman's got a decent package, and I think people will try Control Shaman, but I think it's going to fall a little bit under. But certainly in the future, I could definitely see there being some sort of Freezy, Evolvey Control Shaman deck out there. So if you're a Shaman player, you're eating good tonight. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this, why don't leave a like and subscribe? Everything helps me out, and we'll check out tomorrow. I think it's Hunter, but I don't remember, so don't quote me on this one. But we'll do another one of these tomorrow. Goodbye.